All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our annual TALMUD Torah sponsor of Tavshin Pehei, the Tilson Family of Am Yisroel, for dedicating all the Shumer Joshos this year as a zechus for besuros, tovos for Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD Torah sponsors for Cheshvan, Steve and Teri Czinn, in honor of the birth of their grandchild, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and creation of the Yahrzeit of Rabbi Steve's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Bracha. Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, in the zechus refuah sheleima for Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach ben Musha Chana, and creation of the Yahrzeit of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim. Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gavant, in memory of Moshe's parents, Yakov Meir ben Moshe Leib and Shena Bas Abba, and Dr. Behzad and Yemina Soufer of Los Angeles for dedicating the Shumer Joshos this month in memory and the merit of a speedy and full recovery for Esther Bracha Bas Chaya. We hope, and today's daf is sponsored by Sa'id and Simcha, hoping that today's election results will be in favor of this country, Yidden all over and Eretz Yisrael. This does not reflect an endorsement of any particular candidate, right, or their position. Right? So I want to maintain our tax-exempt status over here, right? But I mean, just a reminder, please make sure if you have not yet voted to make sure to take time today to vote. It is an incredible, not just privilege, but an awesome responsibility. And Halavai HaKadosh Baruch Hu should just guide us and guide our country all in the right direction. I will say, and of course we dedicate our learning in the zechus of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring them home b'shalom and b'karov, and the zechus of our holy soldiers, may they be successful b'chol ma'asei yedeihem. Also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Kuf Lamed Gimel, a really excellent daf ahead of us today. So we are picking up in Yetz Hashem on Kuf Lamed Beis 132. We left off two lines up from the bottom, I believe. Right? Is that correct? Good. So Meir says as follows. So remember again, we're talking about these interesting shchiv meira cases where an individual is dividing up his estate. So remember again, all of this kind of started 2 days ago with some of the statements of Shmuel, where Shmuel explained that halacha l'maisa, there are times where when you gift an estate, you're not really gifting an estate. Well, the truth is, it really all started with Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, because Yochanan ben Beroka was the one who said that you could essentially reallocate property as a form of inheritance, as long as the reallocation recipient is a person who is in your inheritance chain. That was Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. We kind of then branched off to a discussion regarding Shmuel. Shmuel was going to introduce us to this idea that sometimes when you gift property, you're not actually gifting it. Rather, what are you doing? You're assigning custodianship over it. And again, we've kind of branched out from there. We've also been focusing on this idea that when a wife receives a gift of property from her husband, and she is getting a gift alongside the sons, at least according to what we've seen up until now, she lifts her ksuva lien on the rest of the property in recognition of the hana, of the benefit she receives by feeling so important in her husband's eyes that her husband is granting her property ownership. Okay, so now along those lines, who d'amar lehu? Tilsa libras, v'tilsa le'isas. So there was a guy, we'll call him Ruvain. We'll call him Yakov. Yakov is married to Rachel. So Yakov has two daughters. Yakov is married, obviously, to Rachel, and he has two daughters. So he decides to divide up his estate. He says 1/3 will go to daughter A, 1/3 will go to daughter B, and 1/3 will go to my wife. Okay, so what happens? Shchiva chadami banse. So one of the daughters passed away. So we'll say, so now obviously her third goes back into the estate pot. Savara papila meimar, lo shakla elatilsa. So the shaila now becomes, the question that they're trying to figure out is, what are the ramifications of this on the wife? In other words, so the wife was given 1/3 property. So now, what is her relationship to that additional third that has now fallen back into the estate pot? Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So Rashbam about 5 lines up. Da amarle tilsa lebras tilsa lebiti tashniya v'tilsa leishti dahainu asa shutaf ben habanos uminadin avda ksuva samin hani trei tilisi shinasan av. So remember again, this is a classic he's always seen before. He's made her, so to speak, a partner. Right? He's made her a partner. What we've seen up until now is the model is when a wife receives property and she's a partner amongst all the other people receiving portions of the land, she lifts her ksuva lien from the rest of the estate. Now, one of the daughters dies, and let's say again that daughter doesn't have heirs. She's not married, she doesn't have children. So now what ends up happening is her piece falls back into the estate. So the shaila now is, does the wife have some type of claim on that 1/3 or not. So Rav Papa wanted to say, lo shakla lo tilsa. No, she has the third that she received. And remember again, by receiving that 1/3 property, she relinquishes rights in anything else. Take a look at the last Rashbam on the page. So Rav Papa the Meir, less lo be'isisa ela tilsa diyav labayla. All Rachel has is the 1/3 that her husband gave her. The mehad tilsa the chazer v'kana less lamidi shari lomi makom acher bal yado alami osen achasen asman shalbano shakvar machla isha. Now let's remember again, we spoke about this. Even in a case where a wife relinquishes her ksuva rights on property, what is she relinquishing? She's relinquishing current rights, right? Current rights. If the husband acquires new property, everyone agrees that she has rights in that property. Now, it's interesting, so Rav Papa wanted to say, that's fine, but this is not new property. This is the same property. In other words, this was the same property that she relinquished her rights on. Remember, again, Yakov gave 1/3 to daughter A, 1/3 to daughter B, and 1/3 to the wife. When the wife receives her property, she relinquishes rights on any of that other property. Now, even though daughter 1 dies, and the property comes back into like the estate pool, the Rav Papa says the wife has no rights on that. Top of Kof Lamed Gimel, 133a. Amarle Rav Kana. Rav Kana says, 1 second. Ilu hadar kani mi lo shakla. Let's play this out. If Yakov were to acquire new property, what would be the halacha? Rachel would have rights in that, right? She's only relinquishing rights in current property. But if Yakov were to acquire new property, she definitely would acquire rights on that. So the same way that if he were to acquire new property, she would have ksuva rights. When he reacquires property, i.e. daughter number 1 passed away, she acquires rights in that also. In other words, essentially, so whereas Rav Papa says she relinquished rights in daughter A's property when daughter A got her property, so Rav Kahana said that's fine, but this really should be no different than newly acquired property. And in the same way that Rachel would acquire ksuva rights in newly acquired property, she acquires ksuva rights in this property as well. So halacha l'maisa, the Rambam paskins that halacha l'maisa, Rachel would reacquire a ksuva lien in the newly acquired property of daughter number 1. Okay, fascinating. I'm sorry? Yakov's still alive. Yakov's still alive in this, correct. So the Gemara says as follows, because if Yaakov's not alive, that property is going somewhere else anyway. So the Gemara says as follows, Hahu, another interesting case, Hahu, de palginu l'nechase le'isese. V'libnei. So there was a guy who went ahead and divided up his estate between his wife and his sons. So we'll say this is the case we're talking about, right? He's gifting property away between his wife and his sons. So in other words, this is a case, just to frame it, so this is one of these cases where she is acquiring property alongside the sons. Whenever you see that, what does that tell you? That she's lifting her ksuva lien from all the other property. Because as a result of the quote-unquote hana'ah that she gets by being given a property grant alongside the sons, she lifts her lien on the other remaining parcels. Fine. Shir chad dikla. But yet, so in this case, same case, Yakov is married to Rachel. Yaakov's got 2 sons, Reuven and Shimon, so he gives a piece of property to Reuven, some property to Reuven, some property to Shimon, and let's call it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 to his wife. It happens to be he kept 1 palm tree for himself. So he didn't dispense the palm tree. Okay, so the Gemara says, Savar Ravina, Lemeimar, Lesla Elachadikla. So Ravina wanted to say, okay, so now what does Rachel have? So Rachel obviously has the parcel that she received, but she also has a ksuva lien against the 1 palm tree. Okay, look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is actually in the first of the intermediate shorter lines. Hahu de palginu, kol nechasav chilek lebanav uleishto, ubisavaz shchiv mira, tainu asa shutaf ben abanim ela sheshayru dekel echad shelo pirish lemi. So again, shchiv mira case, Yaakov's dividing up his estate, 1/3 to Reuven his son, 1/3 to Shimon his son, 1/3 to his wife. Happens to be, he held back 1 palm tree for himself without allocating it. So it says Rashbam, and Rashbam again, Savar Ravina Lamemar Lesla, Mimosar Ksuvasa Ella Hahu Dikla, Daha Iloshir Dikla Avdu Ksuvasa Min Habanim, Shemachalahem Shibuda, Mishum Dinasa Shuta Benein, Bahashtanami, Zacha Abanim Vihi Titrav Esadekel. So again, so Ravina wants to say like this, obviously she is releasing her claim from the properties that were given to the sons, right? So the sons have their property, she has her property, but the palm tree, which essentially is non-designated estate property, she is going to have her claim against that palm tree. Or she'll have a lien. Okay, that's Ravina. So Amar le Rav Yosef, so Amar le Rav Yemar. Sorry, the Ravina. I lesla chad digla nami lesla. Ella migo de nachsa dikla nachsa nami lekulu nachasi. So Rav Yemar said like this. Essentially, once her lien devolves upon the palm tree, it devolves upon the rest of the estate as well. What does this mean? What Rav Yemar wants to suggest is like this. This concept of a wife lifting her ksuva lien really only applies in a very specific case where the entire estate is being distributed. So when Yakov is distributing his estate, right, and he's giving the sons something, he's giving his wife something, so now she sees herself as a partner in the division. Now that there is a total and whole division, she understands, I'm accepting this parcel and I'm releasing everything else. Rav Yemar essentially wants to say like this. The moment that there is not a full division of the estate, meaning that the estate holds on to property, she's not releasing her claim. She's receiving something, thank you very much, Chaya for the gift, but Lamaisa, she's not releasing her claim. And again, the logic is fascinating, that essentially, since there's still property in the estate pool, that means there's still an estate. See, here's the chilik. When Yakov goes ahead and divides up his estate and gives away all the property, then I will say, then essentially what? There's no estate. If there's no estate, then there's no estate ksuva lien, or estate ksuva lien. If there's property that remains in the estate, that means there's a lien. Once there's an estate, so essentially the lien remains intact, even upon the parcels that have been given to the sons. That's Rav Yemar's logic. Incredible. So if you look at the Rashbam says, Amar Rav Yemar al Ravina I lesla ksuvasa mechila kabana mishum diyada delesla nechasa machrini umachla b'shal shasashata b'neihem iach idiklanami lesla. So in other words, Rav Yemar says it's got to be one or the other. Either by dint of dividing up the estate amongst the sons, she releases her claim on everything. If she releases her claim on everything, then she has no claim on the palm tree either. Or if she does have a claim on the palm tree, then what? She has a claim on everything else also. In other words, Rav Yemar says that it doesn't make any sense. In other words, the concept of releasing a claim is a whole statement, is a whole approach. In other words, I understand it won't apply to properties that are acquired in the future, but it will apply to properties that are currently owned. So, if she is releasing her claim on all the other estate property, then she should have no claim in the palm tree. But if she has a claim in the palm tree, then what? It means she's not releasing her claim on the rest of the estate. And Rav Yemar therefore goes like the second approach, and therefore if she has a claim in the palm tree, it means that she is not releasing her claim in the rest of the estate property as well. Incredible. Okay. And I will say, and that indeed is how the Rambam paskins as well, that halacha l'maisa. So again, what comes out over here is this case of a husband giving his wife property, and by dint of that gift, the wife releasing her ksuva lien against the rest of the estate, really only applies in a situation where the entire estate is being divided and there is no more property left in the estate pool. Then again, she understands that she's a partner in the estate. She gets her portion. For the hana that she receives that portion, she releases her lien in anything else. But if there is property left in the estate pool, the same way that her lien remains on that property in the estate pool, it remains on the rest of the property as well. Incredible. Rav Huna said as follows: Shchiv Meira shakasav chol nechasav la'acher. So Shchiv Meira, now the Gemara is going to introduce us to this case. So I'll tell you, at first glance, it's not going to make sense. It's not you, it's the Gemara. Now maybe you've heard that many times throughout life, right? But this is really true. It's not you, it's the Gemara. So again, let's just lean into the ambiguity and lean into the confusion and embrace it. Sometimes that's what life is all about. Don't battle it, just lean into it. Just accept it that for the next little bit, we're not going to know what the case means exactly. But in Yahrzeit Hashem, here's what you know. If you lean into it, clarity comes. Says the Gemara, Amar Funa. Shchiv Mira, shekasav kol nechasav la'acher. So Shchiv Mira wrote all of his property to someone else. Okay, so far so good. So the Gemara says, Rowan, what do we look at? Im roi li yarsho notlin misham Yerusha. If the person whom he wrote the property to is someone who is fit to inherit him, right? So let's call it Yakov, right? So Yakov is writing all of his property to a guy. We're going to call the guy for now Ruvain, right? So so now the shaila is, what's the nature of this bequeathment? So again, if it's someone who is fit to inherit Yakov, then it's Yerusha. The Gemara says ve'im lav, but if it's not someone who's fit to inherit Yakov, then notlin mishum matana. It's a gift. It's a gift. Okay. No idea what that means. I'm really Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman said, first of all, it's interesting. Gan v'genuvi. So Rav Nachman says, Trafuna. Essentially, why do you have to be a thief? In other words, why are you stealing this ruling? Say, isvir lecha Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, ema lach Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, daha shmaisisach ki Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka hu dazla. So again, so it's interesting. So it comes along Rav Nachman says, Rav Huna, why are you packaging this ruling like it's your own? This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Now I will say, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said something similar. Doesn't sound like he's saying anything. What did Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka say? Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said you could reallocate inheritance. In other words, so I can go ahead and, for example, let's say Yakov has 3 sons, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. And let's assume for a moment that none of them are a Bechar. Right? So now again, when Yakov dies, all of them would split the estate equally. Let's say Yakov decides to go ahead and say, I want all of my property when I die to go to Yakov. To go to Levi. Right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says Yakov could do that. Right? Why could Yakov do that? Because Levi is in the inheritance chain. Right? So remember, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said you could move around inheritance property as long as the bequeathment is to someone who is fit to inherit you. What you can't do is move Yerusha to someone who's unrelated to you. So in other words, you can't bequeath property. In other words, so Yakov can't say, when I die, I want my property to go to, Yisachar, and Yisachar is totally unrelated. That won't work, right? That won't work because he's not in the inheritance chain. So now comes along Rav Nachman and says to Rav Huna, why don't you just say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka? That seems to be what you're saying. Why are you packaging this as your own halacha? To which the Gemara says, Dilma kiyaka amrit. So maybe what you mean to say is the following. So listen to this. You will say, Dahu dahavakach shachiv. There was a guy who was dying. This guy was dying. So listen to this. So they asked him, so we'll call him Yakov, right? Yakov is on his deathbed. And they say, Yakov, who do you want your property to go to? Who do you want your property to go to? So they said to him, Yakov, Dilma leplanya. Maybe you want your property to go to Ruvain. Maybe you want to write Va'amrle Elalaman. So Yakov answered in true Jewish fashion, well, who else should I leave it to? Right? So in other words, it's not quite a yes. It's not quite a yes, but it seems to be a yes. Right? Yeah, of course. Who else would I leave it to? So the Gemara says, Va'amrla. So now, Moshe said, interestingly enough, we ask ourselves, so what do we do with such a scenario like that? So what is that? Va'amrat lana Allah, and we say about such a case like that, Im roi liyarsho not on mishmirusha. So Moshe says, interestingly enough, so now the shaila is like this, right? So let's play this out. So Yakov is on his deathbed, right? You say, Yakov, you didn't leave a will. Who is your property going to? Do you want to leave it to Ruvain? Yaakov says, who else am I leaving it to? Which we interpret to mean yes. So now we look at Ruvain. What's Ruvain's relationship to Yakov? Im roi liyarsho not mishamirusha. So if Ruvain is in the inheritance line for Yakov, then Yakov is leaving it as a Yerusha. Ve'im lav notlin mishum matana. And if not, then we assume that Yakov is leaving the property to Ruvain as a gift, as a matana. Okay, so Amrle in Haki Kamana. Yeah, that's the case I was talking about. That's the case I was talking about. So Moshe said that's the meaning when Rav Huna said that a sheleima who writes all of his property to someone. So we look at, is this person someone who would inherit him? Then it's an inheritance. If it's not someone in the inheritance line, then it's a gift. So this is the case that Rav Huna was referring to. Yaakov's on his deathbed. Yaakov, who do you want to assign your property to? Do you want to assign it to Ruvain? So Yaakov responds to, who else should I assign it to? Which is a yes. So now we look at what's the relationship of Ruvain to Yaakov. If Ruvain is related and in the inheritance line, then it's going to be a Yerusha. And if if Ruvain is not in the inheritance line, then it is going to be a matana. Beautiful. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So now we'll say the shaila is, so I don't understand. So who cares? In other words, at the end of the day, what's happening? The property is going to Ruvain. Who cares if the property is a matana or Yerusha? In other words, so obviously, Mechanistically, it's going to work differently, right? Because remember again, a matana is given when? Matana is given when? When Yakov is alive. And Yerusha is given when Yakov dies. But ex post facto, right? In other words, the result is the same, which is Reuven is going to receive the property. So what does it matter? What does it matter if Reuven receives it as a Yerusha or as a matana? What does that matter? Shabbos says it's fascinating. So my hilchasa, so Rav Bar Ava Kamed Rav Meir Imroi Liyarsho Almanaso Nizonis Minachasav Ve'imlav Ein Almanuso Nizonis Minachasav. This is fascinating. So Rabbi say it depends. Now let's say Yakov passes away, and Yaakov leaves behind a widow. So the general halacha is that a widow is sustained from the estate until one of two things: either until she gets remarried or until she gets her ksuva payout. Right? One of those two things happen. She is entitled to support from the estate. So interesting, the Gemara says like this. So now the shaila is like this: if the property is a Yerusha, right? So that means again Reuven inherited Yaakov. So if Reuven inherited Yaakov, then he inherits also the obligations of the estate, which is to support the almana. If on the other hand it's a matana, so as a matana, remember again, once Yaakov gifts away the property, then what? When Yaakov dies, so Rachel the almana is left with nothing. Now, not nothing. She gets a ksuva. She's still entitled to a ksuva, right? Which again, she has a. Remember again, Rachel the almana will still have a ksuva lien against the gift, right? But lemaisa again, she's not entitled to support. So that's a major nafkamina as to whether or not it is going to be a yerusha or a matana. Okay, so Rava says, I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Migra gara. So you're telling me now that a woman is put at a disadvantage. The almana is going to be put at a disadvantage if her husband gifts the property. Hashta birusha da'araisa amrit amanusa nizonis minachasav. So you're both saying Yerusha's da'araisa. Yerusha's da'araisa. Yet in da'araisa Yerusha, right? So when Yakov dies. And now let's say again that property goes to Reuven. So now Reuven is the biblical owner of that property. Yet even with biblical title, Reuven inherits the obligation to support the almana. B'matana d'Rabbanan lo kol shekein. A matana is d'Rabbanan. Now we'll say, now what do you mean a matana is d'Rabbanan? So the Rashbam points out over here, the Rashbam is on 8 lines up from the bottom, matana d'Rabbanan, ki hach matnas shchiv mera, she'ein ba kinyan ela midrabbanan ki deprecious, lo kol shekein dinizonis. So we'll say, remember again, what are we talking about over here? This is a shchiv mera. Remember, what is unique about a shchiv mera? A shchiv mera has the ability to go ahead and convey ownership without what? Without what? Any kinyonim, right? How do you do that, right? That flies in the face of everything we know. In order to convey ownership, you always need a kinyan. That a shchimera can do without any kinyonim. Again, this is unique by shchimera. This is a din d'Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, one second. So if Yerusha, which conveys title mid'oraisa, yet the almana is supported, so a matana, absolutely right. Yerusha, which is d'oraisa, yet which a Yerusha, which conveys title mid'oraisa, yet the almana, the widow, is supported. Matana, which is only d'Rabbanan, certainly the almana should get her support. To which the Gemara makes Matana d'Rabbanan al kol shekein ela amarava ki d'shalach ra. So remember again, what are we trying to figure out? We had a statement. Refuah made a statement. Shchiv mera is giving away his property. So the Gemara says we look at the recipient. If the recipient is someone who is fit to inherit the shchiv mera, then it's Yerusha. If it's not someone who's fit to inherit the shlemira, then what? It's a matana. The Gemara says, what's nafkamina if the recipient, right? So Yaakov's giving it to Reuven. What does it matter if Reuven gets it as Yerusha matana? Bottom line, he's an owner. So the Gemara wanted to suggest, I'll tell you why it makes a difference. When Yaakov passes away, is Reuven obligated to sustain the almana from the property he received from Reuven? To which the Gemara answered, it depends. If it's Yerusha net, yes. If it's a matana, no. The Gemara says, it doesn't make any sense. If Yerusha is doraisa, right, Reuven is the owner of doraisa, he still has to support. Certainly if it's a matana, which is only d'Rabbanan, Reuven has to support. So we need another nafkamina. The Gemara says, Ella, Amarava, we'll say 6 lines up from the bottom. Ella, Amarava, Ella Amarava, Rav Acha bar Rav Avi. I'm sorry. Ella Amarava. Rav is like this. Here's the nafkamina between whether it's a gift, a matana, or a yerusha. Kidushalach Rav Acha bar Rav Avia. L'divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka nechasi lach va'acharecha leploni. So this is an interesting case. So let's say Yakov. Let's make it even better, right? Avram is going to die. He's sheleima, and he conveys ownership of his property. But the way he does it is like this. Avram says like this: I want my property to go to Yitzchak, and after Yitzchak, I want it to go to Yakov. Now, both say, now let's assume for a moment over here that these people are not necessarily related, right? So Avram says, I want my property to go to Yitzchak, and when Yitzchak dies, I want it to go to Yakov. Okay, so what's the halacha? Im haya rishon ra'il yarsho ein l'sheni b'makom rishon klum shein lashon matana el lashon Yerusha b'Yerusha in lehefsek. Okay, a lot going on over here. So watch this. So if when Avram makes this gift, he makes this gift b'lashon Yerusha, right? And assuming that Yitzchak is someone who is in the inheritance line for Avram, that means Yitzchak receives this as Yerusha. Rabbi says something interesting happens with the Yerusha. Once you trigger a Yerusha, you can't disrupt it. That's what we call Yerusha ein la hefsek. Once you inherit something, that inheritance cannot be disrupted. So remember again, let's play this out. Avram's intention over here was for, right, when he dies, let it go to Yitzchak, let Yitzchak use it for his lifetime, and then let it go to Yakov afterwards. Now the Gemara says, does this work? So the simple answer is, it depends. If Yitzchak is not in the inheritance line of Abraham, then it works fine. Because what is it? A matana. And a matana could be assigned however you want to assign it. So you want to assign a matana for Yitzchak during his lifetime, and then when Yitzchak dies, the matana goes to Yakov, no problem. However, if Yitzchak is in the inheritance queue of Abraham, then when Yitzchak receives it, he receives it as Yerusha. Once something is Yerusha ein la hefsek. You can't interrupt the Yerusha. So once Yitzchak has it, that's it. It stays with Yitzchak, and when Yitzchak dies, who does it go to? Yitzchak's Yarshin, Yitzchak's heirs. Fascinating enough. Sefer Basra, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that's the distinction between a matana and Yerusha. So when Rav Huna said that when the Shechid Meira gives when Yakov the Shechid Meira gives away his property to Reuven, we look at it, if Reuven is fit to inherit him, then it's Yerusha. If he's not fit to inherit him, then it's a matana. And we ask, what's the nafkamina between a Yerusha and a matana? Here it is. A matana is assignable over multiple people. You could say, I want my property to go to A, and then when A dies, go to B, and when B dies, go to C, and so on and so forth, in perpetuity, as long as you want. Because matana, yeshla hefsek. A gift, ultimately, again, could come to an end. You could have a duration that comes to an end. Yerusha, on the other hand, in lahefsek. So if it comes to an Avram dies, if he assigns it to Yitzchak, if Yitzchak is in the inheritance progression, then once it comes to Yitzchak, when Yitzchak dies, it does not go to Yakov, it stays with Yitzchak's heirs. So we'll say, fascinating distinction. So Matana could come to an end. Yerusha, ultimately, again, does not come to an end. I will say, if you think about it also, what's the distinction between ultimately, again, a Yerusha and a Matana? So Matana, generally, you've done nothing for. Right? So when you do nothing for something, when there's no effort expended for something, easy come, easy go. You don't have the ability to retain it in any way. On the other hand, I will say a Yerusha generally means, in a classic sense, you're part of a family unit, some type of family unit. As part of a family unit, hopefully you are contributing in some type of way. That contribution gives you a greater level of vested ownership rights. Yerusha in lehefsek. And I will say, if you think about this, even like b'divrei hashkafa, here's the beauty of our relationship with Eretz Yisrael. Right? Eretz Yisrael is not a matana. Eretz Yisrael is a Yerusha. It's not a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's an inheritance. You ever wonder why does the Ribono Shel Olam frame it that way? Now we understand. If it was a matana, then our relationship with the land could come to an end. Because matana, yesh lahafsik. The fact that Eretz Yisrael is a Yerusha indicates ein lahafsik. And again, I will say, it could very well be, even if Am Yisroel wasn't there for large swaths of time, which happened over our history, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Physical presence is not the determinant. Once, ultimately, again, there was a Yerusha ein lahafsik. And I will say that should always give us an incredible sense of confidence and an incredible sense of optimism and hope that no matter what difficulties we encounter, or no matter which enemies rise up against us, right? The continuity of Eretz Yisrael, the existence of Am Yisroel, of Eretz Yisrael, none of these things are ever in question. Because Yerusha ein la hefsek. That which we possess as a people never leaves us. Matanas come and go, gifts come and go, but Yerusha, something that is yours ultimately, again, because you are in a progression, because you are part of a family, that never leaves your possession. Such an incredible yisod. In any event, so the Gemara suggests that halacha l'maisa, that's the distinction between a matana and a Yerusha. Beautiful. The Gemara says, Amalei Rava, good. Amalei Rava, Rav Nachman, Vaha Ifseka. So Gemara says, 1 second. But that's not what happened over here, right? In this case over here, Avram said, I want the gift, I want it to go to Yitzchak, and then from Yitzchak, I want it to go to Yakov. And even though Yitzchak, right, even though Yitzchak is in the inheritance queue, Avraham still transferred it after Yitzchak says to Yakov. So Avram stopped the inheritance. So you see from that inheritance can be interrupted, to which the Gemara says, no. Last line of Osai Kof Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph 133a, who's Savar Yesh Lahefsek, V'Rachmana Amar Ein Lahefsek. You could think whatever you want, right? You're entitled, I will say, right? Klal Gadol in life. You're entitled to think whatever you want. You just very well may be wrong. So in other words, so Avram thinks that Yerusha, I will say, by the way, Avram thinks that Yerusha can be interrupted, right? The Torah says it cannot be interrupted. Yerusha ein la hefsek. I will say also tremendous Musha Haskell. You know, we kind of live in a time and in a society where if you think something or if you feel something, so it's automatically right, and no one is allowed to tell you that you're wrong. And that is because in our contemporary age, truth is subjective. Truth is subjective. So it's important to understand we fundamentally, totally, and wholly and unequivocally reject and repudiate that idea. Truth is objective. We do not create truth. Torah creates truth. The Ribono Shel Olam creates truth. But I don't like it. But it's upsetting, it's triggering. It says, okay, that's fine, get over it, right? You'll be fine. But you don't create truth. And I will say, this is an incredible yisod. Who's several yesh lefzik? Very nice. Avram thinks that he could structure it in such a way. That's fine. Avram noted. I understand what you feel. I understand what you think. But you're wrong. But I'll say this is the ultimate avodah of being a yid, recognizing that you may feel certain things in certain ways, but just because you feel it, you think it, you identify with it, doesn't in any way make it true or make it right. The Ribono Shel Olam is the one who sets our truths, is the one who sets our values. And what we feel, what we think, really has to yield in the face of what the Ribono Shel Olam tells us is objective and unequivocal truth. Incredible. We'll say, Am Yisroel, great Gemara today. Ahov. So we'll say, so now we see an illustration of this case. Avram says to his friend Yitzchak, I want my property to go to you, and when you die, I want it to go to Yakov. Exactly our case. Verishon Rali Yarshal. Now Yitzchak is related to Avram, and therefore Yitzchak is in the inheritance chain. So the Meir says, and what happens? Shachiv Rishon. So now Yitzchak died. Va'asa Sheni Katava. And Yakov comes along, and Yakov says, okay, now I'm entitled to the gift, right? Avram gave it to Yitzchak. Yitzchak got it for his lifetime. Now that Yitzchak is dead, it belongs to me. So Yakov comes to Bezdin to claim the property. So the Gemara says, Savar Rav Ilish Kamid Rav Meir. So Rav Ilish wanted to say like this. Rav Ilish wanted to say, Sheni Nami Shakel. You know what? Yakov should get something also. We should, I understand, maybe we should split it essentially between Yitzchak's heirs and Yakov. Look at the Rashbam. Sheni nami shakal shari lo nasan levishon kiyim kol yimei chayav umatana enim es kayemes kiyim ladas hanosin. So Rav Ilish wanted to say that halacha l'maisa, Avram's intent was that Yitzchak should get it during his lifetime, and when Yitzchak goes, it should go to Yakov. So Rav Ilish said, but I understand also that Yitzchak was in the inheritance queue, Yerusha in lahefsek. So Rav Ilish wanted to suggest a compromise to say split it in half. Amar Lei. So Rose says, listen to this. So Amar so he responded. So now all this happened in front of Rava. So Rava said, Dr. Village, Dayone dechatzatsta hachi daini. So this is interesting about say. So he says, this is what compromising judges do. Rashbam says, like chatzatsta is like chatzi. Now, the Rashbam happens to have a different girsa where he says, chatzatsta also means beis hakvaros, cemetery. This is what cemetery judges do, which apparently is a shtach, right? But I guess, so again, I guess it's better in the Aramaic, right? So Dayani de Chatzatzta. So essentially, Rava said to Rabbi Elish, like, what are you doing, right? What exactly are you doing? So Rava said, this is what compromising judges do. So again, this is exactly what we just spoke about before. So essentially, Rava was saying to Rabbi Elish, you're wrong. You're wrong. I will say, this is fascinating. In other words, what is Rabbi Elish trying to do? At first glance, it's very noble, right? What is he trying to do? We have a conflict. So what do you do in a case of conflict? What do you do in a case of conflict? Right? Pshara. So let's say, Rava comes along and says, no, there's no pshara here, because there's a right and there's a wrong. We just spoke about this right before. And in this case, we pass in Yerusha and Lehevsek. Therefore, once it comes to Yitzchak, that's it. That's it. It doesn't go to Yakov because Yerusha and Lehevsek. So Rav Elish, you're wrong. There is no pshara. There is no pshara. So the Gemara says, Ichsif. So Rav Elish was embarrassed. He was embarrassed because he paskined the wrong way in front of Rava. So Kari Alav, Rava said, don't be upset. Right? Rava tried to make him feel better because Rava said, listen, don't be upset. Kari Allah, I will say about the situation, Ani Hashem be'ita achi shana. I am HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in the right time, I will hasten salvation. What Rava was essentially saying to Rav Elish is, don't be upset. You were going to make a mistake, but Baruch Hashem, I was here. And because I was here, I set you straight. And because I set you straight, you never ended up paskening or executing the psak in the wrong way. So Rav said to Rav Elish, look, we all make mistakes. You're fortunate, at least, that your mistake never fully materialized. Right? I was here. Don't be upset. So I just want to point out, so first of all, this is how we paskin, that Yerusha ein la hefsek, right? That once you begin a progression of inheritance says, matana gift could be assignable to multiple people. So you could do this, right? So in other words, Avram could say, I want my property to go to Yitzchak. When Yitzchak dies, to Yakov. When Yakov dies, to Levi. When Levi dies, to Yisachar. And if those people are all unrelated to each other, right, and unrelated to Avram, that works. That works. However, halach l'maisa, if he assigns it to someone who is in the Yerusha queue, once Yerusha kicks in, Yerusha ein lehafsek. They will say there's another tremendous Moshe. In the beginning of Choshen Mishpat, the first set of halachas of Choshen Mishpat, Siman Aleph of Choshen Mishpat, is Hilchos Dayanim, the laws of judges. Halacha Aleph, Siman Aleph, Halacha Aleph is whenever the Dayan can make pshara, can make compromise, he should make compromise. However, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, when there is a clear right and wrong, you are not allowed to make pshara. Rabbi say this is such a fascinating idea. Compromise is a mechanism and a tool that is used when sometimes there is a complete lack of clarity or a lack of complete clarity. So again, we're not sure exactly which way there is, so we'll make a pshara. The halacha is when there is clarity, absolute clarity, one person is right, one person is wrong, to engage in the process of compromise is flawed. It is so incredibly important. So pshara is a mechanism to use when there is some level of ambiguity. When there is no ambiguity, there is one person who's right. Let's say, it's like Reuven and Shimon walk into Bezdin, and Reuven stole from Shimon, and Reuven says, yes, I did steal, but please understand, I had a very rough childhood. And my parents didn't love me, I never got anything, right? And therefore, again, that's why I stole. We say, Reuven, we're so sorry that you had that turbulent upbringing, but you're a thief, and there are repercussions for being a thief. There's no let's take this into account. Because why? In that case, there's a clear right, and there's a clear wrong. And both of this is so incredibly important. It's important not just in a legal system, it's also important in life. I will say a lot of times we have to interact with many people with different points of view. And it is always important to be respectful of other people's points of view. And again, everybody is entitled to do what they want to do. You have to be careful between ultimately, again, respecting someone's ability to go ahead and do what they're going to do and accepting it as semi-legitimate in your own mind. In other words, you can live with this dialectic. What you're doing is unequivocally wrong. It's wrong. I'm not telling you what to do. You live and be happy. Do what you're going to do. But I know, internally, my internal hashkafic system, right? What you're doing and what you're saying and how is wrong. And I have to be clear in those personal hashkafas. There's no pshara. There's no compromise between right and wrong. There always has to be a clear line that delineates. Because the moment that everything is a compromise, and the moment that, everything has its place and everything has, then you dilute your entire code and system of morality. So in our interactions, don't be abrasive, don't be judgmental, be accepting and loving of every single person. But internally, make sure you know for you what's right and what's wrong, and don't live a life of pshara in every single area. Incredible Gemara. All right, we'll say, watch this case. Great Mishnah ahead. Here we go. This is a great Mishnah. They're all great Mishnahs. This one's even greater. Watch this. Right, so we'll say, so now Yakov's dying. Yakov's a shemira. What does Yakov do? Yakov totally disinherits his kids. And he gives his property to someone. Right? He had a very nice, landscaper, right? So he really landscaped, took good care of his property. He gives his entire estate to his landscaper, totally bypasses his kids. So the Gemara says, listen, Masha asa asui. Now, again, does Yaakov have the ability to do that? Yeah. How? How could he do it? Matana, right? So yes, he could gift away anything he wants. So what he did is good. But this is not appropriate. It is not appropriate to disinherit your children. Now, I will say this is going to be a fascinating discussion. It's not appropriate to disinherit. It's not appropriate to disinherit your children. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Im lo hayu banav noagim kishura zachur latov." If your children do not behave appropriately, then it is good to disinherit them. Okay, so we'll say, so this is big stuff over here. This is big stuff. Right? So if you take a look at the Rashbam says, "In ruach chacham noche emenu," almost right across the Rashbam. Ein lechachamim nachas ruach mimasav elo charon av gorim lem shekoasin alav teka'akar nachla daraisa. So we'll say, so again, remember, in case I'm in the Mishnah, where Yakov is gifting the property to an unrelated third party, again, does it work? Sure. You can gift your property to whoever you want, but just understand that you are bypassing biblical inheritance law, and in a very dramatic way of cutting out your children. So again, it works, but the Torah, the Chachamim are not happy with you. Rabbi Shmuel comes along and says, but if your children are not noagim kishura, so we'll say, that phrase is actually interesting as well. What does noagim kishura mean? Kishura means like a line. If your children are not following, it sounds like the straight and narrow, right? If your children are not following in the way that they should, we'll have to define what that means. So Shmuel says it's good to disinherit them. Very strong Gemara. All right, so let's analyze a bit more. The Gemara says like this: So we'll say, so here's the shaila. Are Rabbi Shmuel and the Rabbanan disagreeing or not? Right? The Rabbanan essentially say, you shouldn't disinherit your children. In other words, if you gifted your property away and effectively disinherited them, it works. Right? But Chachamim are not happy with you. Rabbi Shmuel says, but if your children are not behaving appropriately, you should disinherit them. Right? Or I should say, Zachur Latov, it's good. So are the Rabbanan and Shmuel arguing, or are they agreeing? That's the Shaila. So the Gemara says, Tashma, we'll say this is incredible Gemaras. Between today and tomorrow, incredible Gemaras. The Yosef ben Yoezer. So we'll say Yosef ben Yoezer. Now, we're going to talk, if we have a little bit of time, which we don't right now. We'll come back in a minute because we're not going to finish with it today. This is Yosef ben Yoezer. The famous Yosef ben Yoezer. The last Mishnah, Masechah Sota. Yosef ben Yoezer was known as an eshkol. Literally, again, as a cluster. Those tzaddikim who possessed Alamailis, who had everything, right? The Mishnah at the end of Sota says, Mishemes Yossi ben Yoezer, Batul Hashkolos, the clusters, those tzaddikim, who had both Torah knowledge and Midos Tovos, he was the last one. He was the last one who had the full package. So listen to this. Yossi ben Yoezer had a son, Shalohaya Noe Kishura, who was not behaving appropriately. Both say, what a tremendous Gemara. And this is very affirming. I mean, it's sad, but it's affirming also. Why is it affirming? I'll say, we all know this. A parent could do everything right. And yet at the end of the day, your children make their own decisions. This is very important. One of the kind of like the hardest pills to swallow in parenting, because we often assume, especially when we're young, that if we take all the right steps, our children will always turn out a certain way. But we sometimes forget that our children have that little thing called Bechira Chavshis, right? That little thing called free will. And with that little thing, they often make all kinds of decisions for themselves. And it's important because sometimes parents beat themselves up very badly when children do different things, and it's important for our parents to understand. Sometimes as parents we do make mistakes, and those mistakes absolutely impact our children, but sometimes we do everything right, or no one does everything right, a lot of things right, and our kids just make their own decisions, and lav dafka that is a reflection on my parenting. So Yossi ben Yoezer has a son who was natural Haya Noi Kishura. Now we'll say, now the Gemara doesn't tell us what that means, but clearly what? It's not good, right? It's not good. In other words, at least, here's how you have to understand it. If it was just a particular Aveira, the Gemara would have told us, right? He wore shatnez. He was a habitual shatnez wearer. Okay, so fine, right? He was always, whatever, he ate tarfus. He was mechal shab. Noe Keshura is a much more like overarching statement that he just wasn't living the right kind of life. So the Havile also the dinari. So Yossi ben Yoezer had a purse of gold coins, which would have fallen to Yerusha to his son. Kama Kadsha, what does he do? He made it Hegdish. He did not want his son to inherit it, so he made it Hegdish. Okay? So young son of Yossi ben Yoezer, and again the son is not named. We'll just call him son. So Azal Nasif Bas Gadol Klili Dianai Malka. So again, the son grew up. Son got a little bit older. And he got married. Who did he marry? He married to the daughter of the guy who made the crown for King Yanai. So remember again, by the way, so just to give you the timeline over here, remember again, Yossi ben Yoezer, Yanai was the second of the Chashmonai kings. Right, so this is Second Temple era, after the Chashmonaim take over, after the Hanukkah story. So this son ends up marrying the daughter of the guy who used to make the crowns for King Yanai. Okay, so the Gemara says, what happens? Olide divisu. So Baruch Hashem, they had a baby. Mazel Tov. Zabin la vinsa. Right. So what happens? So the wife needed to eat. Right. So he was bringing home dinner. So he bought a fish. Right. So the son bought a fish for his wife and I don't know the newborn child, but he bought a fish. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Kara, when they opened up the fish, Ashkach ba margalisa. They found the jewel inside of the fish. Right? Mazel Tov on the Mazel Tov. Right? They found a jewel in the fish. So Amrle said, he shows his wife, the son shows his wife the jewel. Amrle, so she says to him, Lo timtie lemalka, whatever you do, don't bring this stone to the king. In other words, generally you would have brought like a precious stone to the king. The king could use it for his crown, for his treasury. So the wife says to her husband, don't bring it to the king. Why not? The shakli lemina bidami kalili. Because what's going to happen is the king is going to underpay you for it. Right? In other words, the king is the king. And the nice part about being the king is he can get stuff at a discount. How does he get stuff at a discount? How does he do that? He pays you what he wants. Right? That's how he gets it at a discount. So she tells her husband, don't bring it to the king. So what should you do? The Gemara says, so she says to him, Zil amti legabe gizbari. Go ahead and bring it to the gizbar. Bring it to the Pesa Mira. And Rabbi Shmuel points out over here that the stone that he found was one of the stones that they would use in the choshen, in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. So she said, you found the real stone over, so bring it to the Pesa Mira. Well, look, but obviously this woman was a very smart woman. She says, listen to this, V'lo tishaime at, whatever you do, don't give them a price. Don't ask for a price for the stone. Why? Because she said, if you give them a price, that's the price you're bound at, right? Once you give them a price, that's almost as if like a level of commitment to Hagdish, and don't lock it in because they may be willing to give you more than what you're expecting for this. So just bring it to the Gizbar, say to the Gizbar, you want to go ahead and sell this stone, and don't say anything else. So the Gemara says, Amtieh. So what happened? So he brought it to the Beis HaMikdash. Listen to his. I brought it to the Beis HaMikdash. Shamua betleisar ilasa dinari. They appraised the stone for a value of 13 purses of gold dinarim. Wow. So Amrilei, so they said to the son, Sheva is shis leka. So they said to the son, listen, we want to pay you for this, but here's the problem. Right now, the Beis HaMikdash, we're a little cash poor. So what we have is, we have 7 purses of gold dinarim, but the other 6 we don't have. So Amrilei, the Simcha says, Amriluhu, so the son said, no problem, Sheva havulei, give me the 7, shis harahein mukdashos l'shamayim. And he makes a very generous donation. Give me 7, and the other 6 I donate to the Shabbosai. We're stopping here for today. I'm leaving you on the best sound in the world, right? I'm leaving you on the cliffhanger. We're going to continue tomorrow. Shkoyach.